Wow, that is a chug. Welcome to the Trendsetters table. It's just the two of us, but thank you for watching. Trendsetters table is we explore the trends facing millennials and Gen Zs, and we look at things like culture and change and business and innovation and whatever else we find interesting. Society.
That's it.
Society. So.
That's it.
Thanks for joining us. If you listened to the last one, thank you so much. I hope the audio is much better on this one, and I hope you find it good. Today is just me and Jay.
Just us today.
Just the two of us. Who are you, Jay? Tell the people.
All right.
Don't leave the table. Tell the people.
So continuation from last time.
Yeah.
My name's Jason.
Yeah.
Originally from Montreal. Got into crypto through a little bit through mining, but also in Montreal there's a huge developer community, gaming community. So jumped onto the wagon through that, right? And then I moved to Hong Kong in about 2019. And there's so many cool crypto companies that were founded here, right? So started looking into that, and here I am, with Dotted and doing these podcasts with you, man.
Wow, that is a journey. My name is Tamer, decade in TradFi and crypto shit for a while. And yeah, just super excited to be here and do these things with you. And do you know what it is now?
No.
When we're filming this. When we're filming this, it is the beginning part of 2024.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so do you know what that means?
I guess it means we're going to wrap up 2023.
Exactly. We're going to wrap up 2023, and we're going to put a thought piece out of 2024 like every company, because we are standard bearers of the industry. So, but before we get there, how was your New Year's? Any New Year's resolution?
Well, my New Year's was kind of tame. I think this is the first time in many, many years that I decided not to go out, So it was pretty relaxed. New Year's resolution, of course, wouldn't be a New Year's without a resolution. And this year, like many
What's the cutest way to say that? What is your resolution?
Resolution is to actually be more healthy, to go to the gym more, to go hike more, to drink more water, because that's quite essential. But mainly to stay healthy, sleep earlier, hit the gym, and go on more hikes. What about you?
Nice. Water is the best. Obviously health is very important. I actually, I've been meaning to learn how to drive on the other side of the road. Okay. So I got my Hong Kong, we're filming this in Hong Kong, by the way, if anyone's that Hong Kong has the opposite side of the road as the US, and I got my license converted, I want to say early last year. I just haven't touched it at all. So I think, I keep saying it, but this year, it's definitely going to happen. Okay. I'm definitely going to drive a car, hopefully. Well, let's see. But yeah, I think along with New Year's resolutions, part of where that came from is you look back, the last year and everything else. So what was your big takeaway? What is your big 2023? What was a major trend you saw? What excites you?
Big takeaway. Well, as you know, I'm a huge gamer, right?
Oh, I know.
So one of the biggest names in the space is Blizzard Activision. And although they're surrounded by a bit of controversy, they were recently acquired by Microsoft. And for me, that means a lot because it feeds into the possibilities. But ultimately, coming from someone who's played a lot of Blizzard games, what happened to them last year was, I wouldn't say tragic, but it was difficult looking at that, right? Seeing how toxic that environment was. Hopefully, with this new Microsoft acquisition, it leads to a change in the work environment, right? But more importantly, Microsoft owns Game Pass, and the acquisition of Blizzard Activision allows for a lot more games like Call of Duty, like World of Warcraft to also be added onto the Game Pass ecosystem, and that allows them to compete against Sony, right? Yeah. So interested to see where that takes us and how that partnership will look like.
Yeah. So a couple questions. What is your favorite Blizzard and/or Activision game?
What is my favorite? That's a tough one. I would have to probably say Warcraft, just because I started playing computer games. Warcraft was probably my first computer game that I played. ever. But equally taken aback by Diablo as well. So Blizzard has a couple of titles that are quite addictive. Let's just say, just put it that way. But Blizzard, yeah. So Warcraft and Diablo.
Were you one of those guys that would just like coordinate the raids and go in and like?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, once you get into it, it gets you really get into it for like World of Warcraft, right? Yeah. Totally.
Okay. And then what about this deal really like excites you as like your main takeaway? Is it more that it's kind of Microsoft moving more into the game space to really challenge Sony? Is it kind of just what's happening in the ecosystem more generally? Is it just corporate M&A in the US? Like what really just kind of gets you going?
So I think it's on different fronts. Microsoft has been working on their metaverse, right? So looking at how we can take Activision's IP and bring that over. When you think Microsoft, you don't think just gaming, right? When I think Microsoft, I think more corporates, with their programs and all that, and owning things like Minecraft, for example, right? You can see different IPs being used in different universes. So where that will take us is something that I'm really interested in seeing, right? There's been a little bit of stagnation on the Blizzard side, so a bit of fresh input is always good. So interested to see how the IP will play into everything.
I think that's a really good point because honestly, when I think of Microsoft, I don't think of like Xbox or like Halo or any of the IP that they own. I didn't know they actually owned Minecraft. Is it?
If I'm not mistaken, they purchased Minecraft from Mojang Games.
Oh wow, just cool. I just didn't. That's awesome. But
so yeah, to your point, Microsoft has been building up their game portfolio, starting with the Xbox. That was their first console they built in house. But like I said, you wouldn't really think of gaming when you think of Microsoft right away.
Yeah, I think of PowerPoint.
PowerPoint, like slow, not cool things. Right? Yeah. So it's pretty interesting where they're going to take it to.
No, it's really interesting, and I think that's a really good point about the importance of like IP as an aspect.
Yeah.
Right? Like they have this kind of well-deserved, I would say. Microsoft with everything with Microsoft Outlook, Word, like it's very business oriented, but the fact that they've kind of reoriented a bit or just started to realize, hey, they need to broaden quite a lot. And I guess like so originally from the US, coming from the US, Xbox and like the PS, like PlayStations, they tend to fight pretty evenly, but since leaving North America, like I don't think that's the case. I don't know there's very few people in Hong Kong with an Xbox.
Yeah, I've come to realize that as well. So I'm sure you know about I think it's called the Golden Computer Center.
I don't.
So there's a few places in Hong Kong where you can buy gaming products.
Is that the one in TST? No, sorry. Is that the one in Sam Shui Po?
That's exactly it, right? So there's one in Sam Shui Po, there's one in Wan Chai as well. And Nintendo and PlayStation seem to dominate the stores, but you see very, very few Xbox related stores that sell games or consoles. So yeah, I mean they are trying to come to Asia to acquire a larger market share, but I think that they still have a lot of work to do. Yeah.
For those not in Hong Kong, Som Sui Po and Wan Chai, they're like computer centers, so you can buy. Like think of GameStop, but instead of GameStop being a single store, it's like
50.
Complex.
Exactly.
Where it's like wires, action, Funko Pops, everything like just in a block.
Anything and everything, right? From computers to consoles, to even like modding certain things, household appliances they have as well. Right? So.
So before I go down the rabbit hole of Som Sui Po and the gaming centers, but actually we're both kind of entwined in the sense of what was our biggest 2023.
That's it. So
you could have scripted that.
So tell me more. What was your big takeaway from 2023?
My big takeaway. So my big takeaway actually is also Microsoft related. It's OpenAI. So surprise, very unoriginal. OpenAI, LLMs, like generative AI. I think when you look back at this year, maybe a decade from now, right? It's very easy to say this is the year of generative AI, it's always existed, and then we can make the arguments of like how smart the AI really is, or is it just responding to very defined models? But this is when it kind of entered like the popular like lexicon. Everyone was talking about AI, right? And we can talk about like as an investing theme or everything else. Like I mean, let's just put a pin in it, right? I think the more interesting thing is how it has helped businesses and how it's helped like businesses like ours, right? You know, we had, you know, a few years ago, we had some guys doing marketing, and they'd write documents and stuff, and then, you know, I would edit it, and no disrespect to the people that gave me those documents before, but you know, you can have, or you just say, oh, I need someone to do research for me, right?
Right.
Instead of waiting days, littered with results, double checking things, we'd have interns, you know, God bless their souls, but like they just would not, do always what you needed. Whereas like, you know, you would just, you know, put a query in, you'd get a list of information and data points that would help you execute something much quicker. And you know, in the art realm, like we had a project, I don't want to overly make it about like some of the work stuff we've done, but like you know, if you hadn't have had, you know, this generative AI, right, you'd have to find a designer, and we were originally going down that route, and it was like, you know, finding price quotes, you know, looking at like in the portfolio, what can we afford, well, like, you know, just to make sure that it made economic sense for the project, and then, you know, we just happened to, you know, play around with some stuff, and then we realized like actually what we can create with AI is so much better. You know, it's not just creating just a static image that's very visually appealing. There's tools now to make it, you know, animated, which is what we did for a project with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, HKMA. You know, not to flex, a little flex, but it's really interesting how efficiency is just improved, right? And I think, you know, we always think of things at like a very macro level, right? You read the headlines, you see things, and people are like AI, and it can be a bit scary. I think, like, I mean, people can kind of be a Luddites. It can be like, oh, you know, technology's gonna take our jobs and blah blah blah. But actually, like for us, like, it allows you to do stuff with way less traditional resources that you need, and then have outcomes that maybe 5x, 10x better than what you would have originally thought. So it's getting better every day, every week, you know, like, you know, there are some points, I think you would agree, like, you know, when we were using ChatGPT, it was really great, and then it kind of...
So tell me more about that. Seems to me that you use ChatGPT quite often on a daily basis. I do agree that it empowers you to be sort of like a one-man army, right? But there are limitations to the program. Do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I think on a minor, I think like, how do I say it? There's a saying, right? Like, all technology looks like magic until you understand it, right? So if I took my smartphone out and showed it to someone in like the 1950s or something, and they saw something on screen, they'd be like, oh my God, how does this work, and everything else. But we all know the limitations of it, right? Thus, like, if you look at what, like, you know, AI and everything else, like, to maybe people, I feel like there's actually lots of people that haven't touched it or haven't really tried to play around with it, and they just think AI, you know, we talk to some people like, oh, Gen AI can make really beautiful images, and it's like, yeah, they can make really beautiful images, but, you know, to get the image that you want to use, like, for example, the logo that we have for Trendsetter's Table, that is AI generated, right?
That you designed, right?
That I created a prompt in order to design it, right? And I think you hear that and you think, awesome, 5 seconds, you have the reality is actually it takes like hours, because you have to change the prompts, you're doing different designs, you're kind of narrowing in on what you like. So it's not this, you know, simple fix that I think a lot of people think it is. I'm sure it will it's getting better, and it'll continue to get better. And then a lot of it is also prompt construction and everything else. But I do think that we're starting to see the limitations of it. What it will be able to do is really boundless, but it's not, you still need humans, right? But I think to your point, it allows you to free up your brain space, right? Instead of like, if you need to do quick research on a topic, it can at least lay the foundation for you. You just say, hey, find these things and look into it, right? You might not trust 100% of what it says, and some of it might not be 100% what you need, but it's a starting point. But did you feel the same way when you use it?
Yeah, 100%. Like, to your point, I found that it helps you paint a macro picture, but then you really have to spend a lot of time refining what you want to say. So you mentioned prompts, right? So essentially they would be words or phrases to help gear the AI into the general direction. And I found that oftentimes there's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of trial and error. So that's very, very time consuming, right? But I've realized that by saving some of these phrases, actually, it saves you a lot of time. Right, so having a place where you can store some of these phrases and then reuse them to generate different outcomes, it seems to solve a lot of the issues.
Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned that, for example, some people are scared that their jobs are going to be replaced by AI. Are there jobs that will be created by AI, or are there jobs that these people can go train themselves to go ahead and pursue?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. I think it's like, if you rewind, right, like social media, internet, and everything else, right, like you wouldn't have thought of like, a YouTuber as a full-time job, right? Like that's a, podcaster,
True.
right?
True.
Like, even just going like further back, like they just knew with every technological advance, there's new things that will kind of be created as a result, right? Like, and it's always a transition. Like, I think that, unfortunately, there's a book actually called Rise of the Machines.
Okay.
It's a couple of years old now. I think it's talks a lot about the transition or the technology transformation that happens. And like one statistic that I found that was really interesting in the book is it says that in the U.S. there are more people that are the people at like checkout lines.
Cashiers?
Yeah, cashiers.
Yeah,
There are
yeah.
more people that are cashiers in the U.S. than teachers. So
I don't find that surprising.
But the scary thing about that is like that role is definitely disappearing.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like increasingly, super much so in Asia. I mean, like you can say in a market like Hong Kong, like the employment market's pretty thin, so it helps out. But then it was back in the U.S., right? Like more and more and more, there's less cashiers,
More
there's more
self-checkout, right?
self-checkout, right? So is it gonna be totally equal across the board? I think some companies and some people will say, well, yeah, it like removes tedious tasks to basically allow people to do higher level things. I think the worry that we should have or be mindful of as like a species or like a culture or like a civilization is like what happens to those people that those people have to get educated up, right?
Yes. Yes.
So like that's the transition that we need to figure out. But I don't see it as this necessarily, dark thing. I think for certain industries and roles, right, like it's something that will, negatively affect, right? Like I always use the example of lawyers.
Yeah.
Right? You don't necessarily need the traditional like law firm model is they have like 50 or 60 associates to kind of do the grunt work and everything else, and then that work is checked by a senior associate, which is so it's like a pyramid, right? So it's really it's really fat on the bottom and it's high on the top, right? But like whilst you'll still need lawyers, you still need a human to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna go from this to maybe this,
Right.
which creates opportunities for people to have like it's more cost effective, more people can use it, but then the problem is like all those people kind of get shoved out. So we're living in an interesting time.
Very.
Yeah. But I feel like, if you were alive, when the internet was picking up, if you were alive, you just watch some of those videos like where people talk about Amazon. They're like, why would I order a book online? It's like, well, it worked.
No, for sure, for sure. Every generation is marked by some major transition, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there is something exciting that is about to happen soon that maybe you want to talk about.
Hey, Mr. Transition today. Like, it's going well. Well, I think like we could talk more about like the ambiguousness of like the future and stuff like that. But I think we're filming this in Jan 2024. So what is exciting you most this year? Like, what is something that's exciting you? What do you think people should be paying attention to or not paying attention to? Like, what would you share to our audience?
Right. So two things actually.
Two things.
Two things.
2 for 1, guys.
So continuing with gaming, right?
I love
GameFi is something that really is, I find super exciting, 2024. So
Yeah.
step back. GameFi.
What is GameFi
What
for
is
the
GameFi,
people?
right?
For the people, yeah.
So GameFi is essentially the ability to play and earn, right? Play to earn. So it started with, I guess you could say CryptoKitties and then Axie Infinity. So essentially where people can own assets, NFTs, and then use those assets to play a game and generate tokens, cryptocurrencies. So earning while playing, right? But although this concept does sound novel and unique, it didn't have the best start. Couple of theories behind that, but most obvious was that the games weren't very fun, right? So especially the early ones, there's a lot of grind involved. And if you have a game that's not fun, when was the last time you played a game to earn money?
Never.
Never, right?
Yeah.
So when you have a game to earn money, it fills the ecosystem, it fills your players with people who don't really like the game. They're just playing because it's a job, right? And then when the liquidity or the rewards dry up, it can do very bad things to the game, which we saw with a couple of GameFi projects, right? Now, fast forward in 2024, where there's been close to 2 years of experimenting with what works, what doesn't work. Game developers have realized that you can't just push a game out for monetary purposes. There has to be, we have to go back to the fundamentals where the game itself needs to be fun, right? So, and not to mention that pushing out these games takes several years, right? These large game studios to develop these games. So if you take a look, it's about like 2-3 years since the first GameFi project launched out. These AAA studios are on the verge of launching new games that are exciting, not just purely token based, and with developments in technology, blockchain technology especially, you now have the speeds and infrastructure for these games, for these chains to support these games and not just basic games. So I'm really excited about that. Different ones that are rolling out. But more importantly, I would have to say that Solana as a chain would be something I'm really interested in. So for those of you who don't know about Solana.
Maybe before we go into Solana, let's like dig into GameFi a little bit deeper, right? So I think like a lot of your point, like just to kind of make it super simple, right, is like in a video game, historically, right, you don't actually own your assets in a traditional sense, right?
Correct.
So let's go back to the World of Warcraft example you had, right?
Yeah, okay, that's an excellent one, right?
So you grind for stuff, and then there's this informal trading economy.
Yeah.
And then the game can decide to take something away.
Absolutely.
They can, I think you mentioned World of Warcraft has done a lot of let's say shiesty things to fans. So they've changed things up, right? So you as a player have worked really hard to get yourself an item.
Absolutely.
And then you don't own the item, even though technically they sell you skins, or you don't really own the item. And if I can kind of break down some of the finance things that you mentioned, right? It's like you having the asset that you've earned and then selling it, or sharing it or giving it to someone else in a way that gives you back the reward from your time. And that reward can be another asset in the game. It can be in-game currency, or it can be cash.
Yeah.
So you see this, like, I think in like RuneScape. There's really big in like South America that people are mining, World of Warcraft. So that ecosystem really exists. I mean, look at Fortnite. The main way the game makes money is selling skins. So for your point, it's like this stuff has already happens. Web3, like NFTs were kind of put in place to kind of make the system more fair.
Yeah.
And this new transition, right, is going to make the games more fun. So for those of you who don't know, like, Axie Infinity was kind of like a Pokemon style game. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Pokemon style game, but what happened was a lot of it was just people playing the game and not really enjoying the game. There are people that enjoy the game. I don't want to speak negatively of it, but it's just a stereotype of it. People are playing the game to earn tokens, to make money. And I think a lot of your point is that model of speculation or earning to play is not really something that's happening in this new transition.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that on top of the fact that the games themselves are more appealing, the graphics are a lot better. Have you ever had a chance to play Axie Infinity?
I'm not.
So the graphics was one of the issues. It was very let's say like 1998, like Neopet style, where it didn't fit with the times, right? So if you're spending hours on this game that's stagnant, that's not fun, then what do you expect when the rewards dry up? So moving forward with these chains being able to support the graphics behind it, I'm expecting a new wave of these GameFi projects to be focused on the important part, which is being fun.
Being fun. Does that, okay, we're all about, leading into things. Does that link back to your earlier point about Microsoft? Do you see a lot of traditional companies looking at, Web3 or NFTs or any of these kind of assets?
Yeah. So Microsoft might not be the best example just because with Minecraft, right?
Sure.
They mentioned that they were moving away from NFTs, but I think for the gaming space, a big one would be Ubisoft and what they're launching out with their new Web3 game and working with like Oasis, for example. There's a lot that can be done with blockchain, a lot that makes sense, like the points that you mentioned, how these secondary markets already exist within some of these games, and it's just creating it so that it's ready and available from the start, and it's completely interoperable in the sense that a player who's devoted hours to grinding on this character item can now easily sell it to get back his or her time, and then move on to another game.
Yeah. I think your point about Ubisoft is really interesting because, right, like it's always existed, but for gaming companies, the beauty of it for like purely the player is, hey, there's an asset that I can own, and I can theoretically, it's interoperable. I can put it into a different game, or I can sell it and trade it and do what I want with it of this item that I own. And for like a game developer, why it's really interesting, be traditional game developers, right? They make a lot of money selling skins.
They do.
Right? Like Fortnite again. Majority of the money is made from selling skins. The interesting thing for someone like Fortnite is, or just any game, like CSGO, like a lot of the biggest sales is like they used to have like this marketplace where people would trade and sell, and skins would go for like tens of thousands.
Even more sometimes.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Where it becomes interesting is like, with a smart contract is you can have perpetual royalties.
That's 100%.
So as an item gets more interesting for the game developers, that's unlocking a new revenue stream for them.
That's totally true. So I do want to point out that on the secondary marketplaces, the game developers seeing zero income from this, right? So it is a pretty lucrative income stream, as we've seen on NFT collections, secondary sales volumes. It can generate income that can run a company, right? So by having that natively embedded in the game, it makes it so that your players won't look elsewhere to sell off the item, right? So you get all the upside by giving off a little bit of control to the end user, right? And then back to the Ubisoft point, I think a lot of companies, a lot of AAA studios were waiting to see how the market would receive NFTs. I know that at the very beginning, gamers didn't really like the idea of NFTs with games because it was seen as a cash grab. But more and more developers are not mentioning that these are NFTs and just simply using the existing technology to just incorporate it so that the player doesn't know that they have a wallet, doesn't know that they're transacting in crypto, doesn't even know the asset is an NFT, but the underlying infrastructure is there. Yeah.
Very interesting. And I think you're totally right. I think what happened really, I mean, a lot of people have lived it, but just to reiterate, right? I think a lot of the maybe animosity that some of the community has, first, totally valid. Totally understand. There was as a gamer, you're more inclined to try new things, to be at the cutting edge of stuff. And there was so much money kind of going around at that time period that a lot of, let's say, unsavory characters entered to kind of exploit them. So there's this natural aversion to them.
Totally.
And I think the interesting point of what you're saying is, companies now are looking at the technology and saying, this is really cool. Let's not sell it as this is an NFT, but let's sell it as this is a use case, a killer use case for Web3.
That's it.
Killer use case for gaming. This is a new revenue stream, and everyone wins. And I think I'm really excited, like you, to see what's
what's to come from that. Yeah.
It's a good 2024
That's
excitement point.
That's why I chose it.
Yeah.
And then feeding into that would be, since we're talking about chains and all that fun stuff, would be the darling of this this run, Solana. Right? So, do you want me to explain Solana? Do you want to explain Solana?
I want you to explain Solana. It's your 2024. Why are you excited about Solana?
So
Tell me more.
what I'm excited about Solana is that so I got the chance to use Solana probably a couple of years ago from this collection called Claynosaurs, and essentially the ease of onboarding is so native to Solana. So gas prices, for those of you who don't know, on Ethereum, the transaction fee that you need to pay is quite high. It can skyrocket, right? Which means that it doesn't really make sense at certain times to approve transactions. For Solana, there's none of this issue because the gas is so cheap, right? That it can process thousands of transactions. So essentially, Solana has a much bigger use case for mass market, at least the way I see it, right? And then if you talk about on the speculative side of things, the growth for Solana is much more. So that, so really interesting to see what Solana will bring, not to mention the fact that they're, I think, the first ones to launch a phone, right? Like no other chain has done that. No other chain has launched a phone. And they did so, I think, last year. But this year, interestingly enough, I don't know if you checked on eBay, the prices have skyrocketed. I think I saw something like $5,000-6,000 US per phone. And that's primarily due to a lot of airdrops. So for those of you who don't know, airdrops are essentially a gift from protocols or people who issue tokens to certain wallets with transactions, right? So a number of these new tokens promised an allocation of these airdrops simply by holding a Solana phone. So Solana phone, I believe, comes with a built-in wallet, so they know exactly who owns that phone, and essentially all these new tokens that are coming out, a portion of those are going to be given to Solana phone holder. So if you're a Solana phone holder, you essentially are making bank by just holding this phone, right? So Solana, first ones to do so, and I'm interested to see whether phone manufacturers are going to jump in on this craze, because I think the Solana phone, and don't quote me on this, I think the Solana phone was $700 or $800 US. And if you put it at 7,000, it's like 10x, right? Mm-hmm. So as a phone manufacturer or a smaller phone manufacturer, like say Virtue, for example, right? Would they want to be running a crypto strategy to boost the sales of these phones? Who knows, right? It could be a very valid one. So yeah, Solana, a lot of interesting things happening there. Solana Pay. I think right now they're ranked number 5 in terms of token lock. So they're moving on up. A lot of interesting things happening for Solana this year. Partnerships. They're doing hacker houses all across the world. I think there was one in Hong Kong in November. So yeah, interested to see what Solana has to offer. What about you?
Well, before we jump into mine, let's stay on Solana for a minute. Like, there's a lot of interesting things, right? So, I want to ask for you. There's a lot of things you mentioned about Solana, right? Like, well, first, shout out to Claynosaur. But is there a certain collection or is there a certain thing now on Solana that you find very interesting?
That I find very interesting.
Collection.
Yeah, so of course we're talking about Claynosaurs, right? So these guys come from a animation background, and what they're trying to do is bring utility and value to the community. So for those of you who are familiar with Pudgy Penguins, they did a lot of offline type of revenue activities. So they have toys, they have a cartoon segment. So that's on Ethereum. On Solana, Claynosaurs is doing something similar. So they launched a plushie, a toy collection, but they're moving towards a game and a cartoon, right? So collections that are not just PFP orientated and have real world utility that can tie in mass market, I find super interesting, right? Collections that tie in Web3 are also interesting as well. So there's a collection called Mad Lads that launched so the team behind it is, I believe, called Backpack. And why Backpack is interesting is they recently launched an exchange that pushes Solana tokens, right? So projects that are not just profile pictures and actually are doing things in the space, I find super interesting, because the fundamental technology behind NFTs is essentially to create communities, right? So anything that leverages that to further the cause is always interesting for me. Yeah.
So a couple things, right? So first, there's just they should jargon. PFP means profile
picture.
Yeah, it's a profile photo. Picture. So for a lot of people, a lot of the NFT collections, correct me if this is fair to say, a lot of NFT collections that launched, let's say in the hype cycle of 2020, 2021, 2022, they were PFPs or profile photos. So essentially, they were just interesting images or pictures of things based on different traits you wanted to get it, and the utility of that was just it's a picture, and they launched it, right? What I think is really interesting of what you're saying is like Solana and Pudgy Penguins, sorry, it's not Solana, Claynosaurs and Pudgy Penguins, what they're doing is kind of taking that image and building IP around it. So that's really exciting because you're using that as a medium of storytelling and creating a new thing, right? And I agree with you, right? If you think about it in a different way, like, Minecraft, like I grew up, super random, I grew up loving Bionicles.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
that's Lego.
That's
right?
Lego.
Yeah.
So they did it as like a way to kind of go around. But Bionicles launched, and it was just like the toy happened.
Yeah.
And then they built up this lore. But like
I remember it was huge, right? Then they started selling comics, selling books, not just the figures, and they had movies, right? That's it. You can't just rely on one segment. It's how do you branch out?
Exactly, and that's kind of to your point. It's like that's kind of the interesting thing that's happening now. It's like these profile PFP collections are kind of creating their own lore, their own story, and that's then resonating. Like I think Pudgy Penguins was available in Walmart. In North America. So I mean, like for the kid, they're just like, oh, I really like, I like this cute penguin, and then they discover the lore behind it. They discover, then they get to own a part of like the original piece. So then it kind of builds that next level.
That's it, and that's why a lot of companies diversify their products. You look at like Marvel, like why would they come up with like kids cartoons, right? It's to start them off young, it's to diversify, and yeah, totally.
Get them young.
Get them young.
No, but I do think if I look at the thread of what you're saying, though, also it's like for Solana, which is interesting and why you seem to like it, is like I'm not, look, this is not why you like it, but they're doing a lot of other things that are interesting, right?
Yeah.
They're not just like, hey, we're a chain and we're gonna go that way. They're like, we're launching a phone, we're doing these hacker, like they're kind of going in a lot of interesting ways and places that maybe some of the other foundations or just really or crypto foundations. So after cryptocurrency launches, they kind of manage it and blah blah blah. But they're just focused really on the financial speculative asset, whereas Solana, from what I'm gathering, is doing really cool things. Like building a phone is a really daring thing.
It is. I think before I looked into the numbers behind it, I mean, it's a very expensive task to do with not too many returns. I think the real money doesn't derive from selling the physical phone, but the activities that come subsequent to it, right? So starting your own, I guess, hardware takes a lot of dedication and time, right? And of course, you have to be adventurous enough to pursue that. They obviously clearly have a plan, but yeah.
I mean, the cynical view is actually the guys that founded Solana. I found this out from the Marquise Brown.
Okay.
The guys that started Solana actually built a version of that phone before, and then they raised the money through Solana. But I mean, like, if you want to get like super cynical, but like, no, I agree with you that a more cynical view would be they just launched Solana and used it as a cash grab versus they used it to kind of do something, to your point, interesting and build out something really cool that people would like. So yeah, I think that's really great. Is there one thing that you feel like, what's the thing is that the thing you love most about Solana, or is there something else?
I think one of the things that really attracted me towards Solana was back, I think in 2022, where the liquidity was pretty much drying up for NFTs, right? And there wasn't much activity on Ethereum-based NFTs, probably nothing on Polygon. But essentially, Solana was one of the only chains to keep this activity going, right? And then the community was not just active; they were constantly on AMAs, they were pushing other things, trying to get more partnerships going. So just the community that lives on Solana, I find extremely interesting, and because of that, it leads to many different parts. So I can't just say just the phone. I would say the phone, the DeFi elements, the NFT community side, and the ability to go into different markets. So payments is something that they're working on as well. So just the broad dynamic of everything attracts me to Solana. Yeah.
Something to look at for 2024.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I've spoken a lot. What about you?
What about me? Well,
what excites you about 2024?
that's life. No. So what excites me about 2024? I think that the really boring. It's a very, very boring answer. But the thing that excites me most is BTC, Bitcoin.
Why is that boring?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like if you're talking to someone, you're like, what excites you? Bitcoin. It's just it's like talking to a gold bug and being like, what excites you? Gold. Like it's yeah. But I think there's a lot of interesting things that happen in 2023, and there's a lot more interesting events happening in 2024 that I guess I'll cover. I got some stats here. So, in 2023, crazy comeback. Not as good as Solana, obviously. Not as good as Solana, but the market, it rose from a low of around 16K in Jan 2023, and it closed at like 40K in December. I mean, the prices kind of moved around a bit. Now it's trading at like 45.
Yeah,
this
I think
is on Jan 9th, not to date the podcast, but and it just in terms of a market cap percentage, Bitcoin has historically had a much larger point, but it was at like 38% in Jan, and that got up to 50% in December, and a lot of it is really having to do with the Bitcoin halvening.
Tell me, what is this halvening?
Yeah.
Sounds so mysterious.
I know, it sounds like a horror movie. It's the halvening. Dun, 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 dun.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, look, the Bitcoin halvening. So, basically, Bitcoin has a fixed supply, and its scarcity is managed through something called a halvening designed to curb inflation and increase its value over time.
Yep.
So, over every 4 years, the reward you get from mining Bitcoin, right? So
you get a reward for mining Bitcoin?
You do. So Bitcoin uses something called proof of work, and every other cryptocurrency uses proof of stake. But anyway, we can get into the nitty gritty later. But basically, over every 4 years, the reward you get for mining, just doing complex equations to secure the blockchain, it goes down. It goes up by half. So I think it was 6.25. It's 6.25 BTC now for the reward.
Right?
Each block.
Okay.
That's going down to 3.125, and historically, right, it's Bitcoin halvening is associated with a massive price increase, right? So the famous one is in 2012, the Bitcoin price rose from $12 to over $1,000 US. Wow. I know, it's a lot of Bitcoin.
Well,
that's a lot of fiat.
That's a lot of fiat,
yeah, it's a
right?
fiat. And similar patterns occurred in 2016 and 2020. So just from like a price perspective, it's a really interesting time, and historically that's led to larger bull runs in the crypto ecosystem, or crypto asset ecosystem, or digital asset ecosystem, I should say. This year, it's very, very different and a little bit more interesting because if you pay attention to kind of what's happening in the U.S. market specifically, there's a lot of conversation about the Bitcoin spot ETF. Yeah.
Spot ETF, can you tell me more about that?
I will tell you more about the spot ETF.
Is it just one company that's going after that, or is it many companies?
Many companies, all of them. So all the big guys are going in. Invesco, BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, Grayscale, which is more of a traditional guy. But it's pretty interesting, right? It's pretty interesting for a nerd like me.
No,
it's pretty interesting. Yeah. So ETFs in general are pretty interesting, right? So an ETF essentially, it's a traditional. I guess just for the broadest sense of the audience, right? So it's just it's basically crypto ownership now is really complicated for institutional players and retail investors. I would argue, right? So you have to set up a wallet. You have to custody all your assets. If you forget your password, you're fudged, right?
Yes.
Whereas like, I forget my password to my bank account back in the US once in a while. I can message the bank and be like, yo, can you reset it to me? Whereas like in crypto, there's always a risk of your wallet being hacked and nobody insures it, and there's all these kinds of other things, like not your keys, not your coins, right? If you tell that to your stock portfolio or your cash, your bank, right? They're not gonna be like, oh, your credit card got stolen. Not your card, not your cash, right? You still get, but you get your money back, right?
Yeah.
And I think for people in the ecosystem, like it seems normal, right?
Yeah.
And then like not your keys, not your coins, and there's almost a sense of, I don't want to say delight, but there's a sense of like, oh, this guy didn't know what he was doing. I'd never get hacked, and then a few months later they get hacked, right?
Right.
So like for the majority of people, right, especially institutional guys, right, institutionals being like pension funds. So pension funds is like the retirement of like the firefighters retirement fund, government people, like first responders, like they have a teachers, right? They won't be able to touch like their pension won't be able to touch this asset some of the times, right, directly. Things like an ETF, because they're traded on stock exchanges, right? Somebody else custodizes, and they manage everything. So if there's anything that goes wrong, they're in trouble, right? But you can get exposure and like you can get the ability to gain. Imagine you bought Bitcoin when it was $12 and now it's 1,000. I mean, now it's 43. So even that guy did very well. But I just mean like it allows more people to kind of play both retail and traditional. So if you look, retail and institutional. So if you look at, for example, this moment as like historically prices go up, the ecosystem or the amount of people that can participate is much bigger. So as a, not financial advice, not anything, but like just as a way of people that are in the system, like it's an easier way for a lot more people to get excited and go in. I mean, like BlackRock, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not like, I'm not going to shame any firms, but like they're big guys, right?
Yeah.
They what, like 6 trillion, whatever. They're the second largest asset. They're either the largest behind Vanguard, or they are the largest holder of like financial assets in the world. So like it just allows more people to participate. And look, like the reality is it does exist, right? There's a lot of actually traditional financial crypto products. Like you could go trade crypto futures on the Chicago, like CBOE, or you could go to like, some stock exchanges already offer it. But the one that's happening now is in the US. So really long, complicated history that's gone behind it. But basically everything is sort of lining up at this really interesting inflection point. And that's really cool from a price, not just from like a price angle, but like the reality, I would say, not the reality, but like kind of a sad reality about like Web3 in general is people really care when prices go up.
Yes.
So
sadly,
I would say for builders in the space, why it's really interesting is like this kind of moment will then redraw attention in, and it just kind of shines light on how the industry, how the ecosystem, how the community is building. So I think from that perspective, the last few years, there's a lot of bad actors, SBF, Toquad, just to mention a few. But I think what happens is there's always a bit of a shakeup, and I think people are a lot more wiser because a lot of people got scammed. So I think that the ability for more people to come inside, more traditional guardrails, right? Like the problem with some of the stuff is there wasn't that guardrail in place.
Right.
So people can now get exposure, can participate in ways that they feel safe, and then it also shines a light on just what's happening in the industry, which is really cool. And not financial advice, but it's a good time. It's a good time.
That's good. That's super exciting. So if I understand correctly, they can get exposure to Bitcoin for much less risk, right? And then
yes, they can. So they can basically. It's a way to get exposure in a way that they're used to, right? So like I'm very comfortable buying. I mean the largest holding in my brokerage account is like VOO, right? The Vanguard, S&P 500 ETF, right? So it's a very standard, vanilla, boring way for a lot of people to get exposure, and that's really interesting. And then the fact that, it's a spot ETF, meaning that it's the actual price.
Right.
It reflects the actual price of BTC at the moment, right? So that's kind of the key difference. And, for better or worse, US kind of has I would say, like, there's a lot of different other markets that are doing it. Actually, Hong Kong, they approved their ETF and they're actually doing something more interesting. It's not just, I have to look into it a bit more, but I think the way they're doing their ETF is actually more interesting than what the US is doing. But all this in a bear market where people have lost interest just shows you that, the industry is not dying. It's something that you really need to kind of pay attention to still. And I think, that's something that's really cool.
I really like your point where you brought up that a higher BTC price means more eyes back onto crypto, which helps builders because AI seems to have taken up the narrative currently. So a shift in visibility was definitely helpful for crypto as a whole, right? Do you see any other ETFs on the horizon outside of BTC?
ETFs?
Yeah.
I mean, well, actually, you can get exposure to crypto products in a lot of markets already. So you can get it. I think Swiss Stock Exchange 6 has some Bitcoin ETFs. I mean, don't quote me on this. I looked at this a long time ago, but it has crypto asset ETFs you can get available. HKX actually has crypto ETFs. I think they've launched it. HKX being Hong Kong Stock Exchange has listed crypto products. I think that the Singapore Stock Exchange had a data feed, but I don't know if they've launched like products yet. I think there's products in Deutsche Börse.
Okay.
So the German stock exchange. So it's not like it's not in existence, and you can get futures and options and stuff like that. It's not like it doesn't exist. But I would say like one of the other kind of things is like, again, I don't want to talk poorly of anyone, right? But there's the Grayscale Trust, right? You can get Bitcoin exposure, right? The difference between the Grayscale Trust and say like a BlackRock ETF, right, is like Grayscale. I haven't looked at what they charge now for the trust, but I know for their ETF application they charge 1.5%.
Okay.
Like for like a holding fee, right? Like it's just right. But like iShares was like 0.2. So it's just like you get more. Like the reality is this launching of new products is more competition, which means prices go down. So it's like if I'm a traditional guy and I want to get some exposure to Bitcoin, right? I don't have to pay arguably an exorbitant amount of money to one firm, right? I can now have competition and I can get money. I can get exposure that way.
Yeah.
And I can all the savings within, like if they're looking at pension funds, all the savings or all the gain then goes to like the firefighters or the teachers, right? Versus financial players, which we can argue about, like they're relative to everything else. Like I don't want to solely focus on that, but I think it's just another. You don't like in many ways you don't necessarily need for like crypto has existed for so long, right? But like I think that for a lot of the traditional financial industry, and maybe tends to skew older, they look at what's happening in digital assets with a lot of skepticism. Like a lot of like, oh, there's whatever and blah, 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 there's funny money, blah, blah, blah. But like, I think for us that really, find it interesting, I don't want to say believers sounds a bit,
Too culty.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be an evangelist or like, you're like, oh, this is the, like, you know what I mean? But like, it's a nice validation. You don't need the validation, but it's a nice validation of this as an asset class that's not going away. It's something that most of us already know and believe that have digital asset exposure. And I think that why it's interesting is like, I remember the bull run in, I want to say 2017, 2018?
Yeah, 2017.
2018, right? And it was all over the news, and my mom was like, "Oh, I should buy Bitcoin." My mom doesn't sound like, sorry, mom, you don't sound like that. But like, man, like they wanted to get into it, but if I told them, "Oh, you need to buy this, you need to set up a wallet," and okay, how do you get the? Well, this credit card doesn't work. Well, you can transfer it this way. You can do,
right.
Do you know what I mean?
There's
so
too many
it's
steps, right?
There's too many
drop-off
right? Like,
points,
like my fiance is. Well, that's another great thing that happened.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. But like, she wanted, crypto
Right.
asset exposure, right? She wanted to buy some Bitcoin, right? Like, she would have made actually a pretty sizable return even when she was looking in 2021 when the price was 30. Okay, yeah, it went down, but it's gone back up.
Yeah.
So she's net up. But asking her to like set up a crypto wallet, buy cryptocurrency, customize itself, and then right, it's just another layer of difficulty that I think 99.9% of the market
It's not ready for.
It's not ready for,
I agree.
and nor should they be. I think that's the. We can get on this as more like an ideological thing, but like I think one of the problems is people in Web3 kind of have a system in place for themselves.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is the way it is, right? But it's like, well, it's not actually good.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Like the thing with seed phrases and all that.
No,
it's not mass market ready. Right?
It's not mass market ready. Like, I like using my Face ID to pay my credit card bill, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I think like it's people will opt in. I think if you look at these things, people opt in more for convenience, and having an industry that doesn't prioritize convenience prevents mass adoption. So I think, you know, that's kind of the thing I'm most excited about. One argument that you can make is that if you subscribe to perfect market hypothesis, I'm not going to get to that, right? But if you believe that, if you believe, like basically, you could say that all this information is out there, and that is why the price has rallied a certain amount.
Correct.
Right. So like, you know, because the US ETF thing is going through, because halvening is happening, the price of Bitcoin now reflects that assumption, right? Could drop. It could not drop, right? Maybe it's still on the fringes because, you know, for whatever reason, people aren't as excited about, you know, digital assets.
Yeah.
Interchanging, I'll say digital assets. People aren't as excited about digital assets or Bitcoin as they once were, right? So that's the argument that maybe it doesn't pump like a crazy amount. The other argument would be that historically, there has been price action in the positive sense, and that doesn't necessarily equate to like, let's say the Bitcoin ETF, like it gets approved by the SEC, right? Yeah, it's probably gonna be like a explosion tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Like, or like, not that it's happening tomorrow, but like the price would bump immediately, right? And how long that rally would happen, I mean, it's TBC. But I mean, I would say it's comfortable and safe to say that that asset would likely increase because the last 3 times it happened, the prices increased. But past performance doesn't indicate future returns.
That's it.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I won't go into it too much more, but like, it's not just, I mean, there's the finance element of Bitcoin. There's the, you know, the technical bits that's happening, like the Bitcoin ETF, Bitcoin halving, price action. I think the other interesting thing is like there's a lot of, like Bitcoin ordinals, right? Like I do have one stat, but I won't go too much into it. Is like, you know, Bitcoin ordinals essentially
What are Bitcoin ordinals?
Bitcoin ordinals, I think the easiest way to describe it is just like it's like an NFT or thing using the Bitcoin protocol. Okay. Yeah. Is that a fair way to describe it?
It is. I think so.
Yeah. And you know, the software where Bitcoin ordinals was issued, according to my notes, according to these notes, which I hope are correct, unlike last time, but according to this was like launched in Jan 2023. Right. So why it's really interesting is like in December of 2023, the sales volume was $881 million from Bitcoin ordinal sales.
Just Bitcoin ordinal.
Just Bitcoin ordinal. Okay. And that was the single highest month of sales for any NFT, ETH and Sol included, in 2023.
I remember when things were really slow for ETH and Solana, BTC ordinals, inscriptions was really pumping.
That's December though, right? December 2023. So like, just if you look at it from I think like people are really excited about Bitcoin. There's like, we can talk about a different time, like the whole tribe of, you know, Bitcoin maxis and stuff. Yeah. But it kind of just shows you like, there's a lot of interesting thing happening. There's you know, improvements on like the Lightning Network and everything. So there's just so many things being built on top of it that makes, you know, BTC really interesting. You know, that I think is something to kind of look at in this. I feel like this year is another kind of, you know, inflection point for Bitcoin. So I think, let's see.
No, I definitely agree with ordinals, Lightning Cash, a lot of new developments being added onto Bitcoin, which, I mean, giving it more utility can't hurt it, right? A lot of people are complaining, oh, no smart contracts on Bitcoin, it's archaic. I mean, no, developments are being made, right? So interesting to see how this adds to the entire Bitcoin ecosystem.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting time to
Definitely.
be in not just Web3. It's just an interesting time generally for
Just
like
in tech in general, right? You mentioned
Yeah.
OpenAI. There's a huge correlation between blockchain and AI as well, and I'm sure other technologies. So, 2024, the year of not just the dragon, but a lot of emerging tech, right?
That's why it's a dragon. It's ferocious. Firing. Hopefully my portfolio goes on fire as well because it's been a
That's
hard
it.
year.
The portfolio, sir. The
The
portfolio.
portfolio's on fire.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think let's maybe just cut it there.
That's it. I mean, that pretty much wraps up today.
Yeah. And thank you for everyone listening. Thank you so much for listening again.
Until the next time.
Yeah, until next time. We appreciate you. We're trying our best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.